The details behind Catherine's shock absence from Royal Ascot. Did we see a new member of the royal family this week? And what will we see?
Catherine, Princess of Wales, has been hiding a fourth child. No announcement, no press, no tradition, just silence. Until now. Moments after the secret birth, she turned to William and whispered 4 words that shattered the illusion. "I can't stand alone. The monarchy will never be the same." Catherine, Princess of Wales, has spent over a decade earning the public's admiration. Not just as Prince William's wife, but as a figure of quiet strength within the royal family. She's always been composed, always appropriate, and rarely controversial. To the public, she appeared unshaken by the pressures of royal life. She attended events with grace, greeted crowds with a calm smile, and supported her family with a level of commitment that never seemed forced. Everything about her suggested she had it under control. But behind the poise was a woman carrying far more than anyone realized. For years, Catherine has walked a careful line, balancing royal tradition with a modern, relatable image. She was seen dropping her kids off at school, speaking about mental health, championing early childhood development. Her projects felt personal, never performative, and people connected with that. She wasn't showy or loud. She didn't need to be. Her strength came from consistency, stability, presence. That's what made the silence in early 2025 feel so loud. When Catherine suddenly stepped back from public appearances, there were questions, but no answers. The palace offered vague statements about health and recovery. Speculation swirled, but nothing concrete was said. Even the most seasoned royal watchers couldn't piece it together. Where was she? Why was she absent? And why was everyone so tight-lipped? For months, the image of Catherine remained frozen in time. Strong, smiling, composed. But behind palace walls, reality was unfolding in a very different direction. Those who knew her best began to notice subtle changes. She looked tired, withdrawn. Her once regular presence at royal engagements vanished. She was no longer seen at school events or photographed with her children. Even her closest aides didn't have full answers. Just instructions to maintain privacy and hold off on any public-facing duties. It wasn't like her. Catherine had always been reliable, dependable. She didn't disappear. So when news of a secret 4th pregnancy finally emerged, it wasn't just surprising, it was a complete shock. This wasn't a decision made out of strategy or public relations. It was personal, deeply personal. And it revealed something the world hadn't seen in Catherine before. The weight of it all. The cost of being composed every day. The toll of constantly showing up, even when you're struggling inside. That's the part the cameras missed. And it's what makes her recent confession, those 4 words, so powerful. Because for the first time, Catherine wasn't just the future queen consort or the royal role model, she was a woman asking not to be left alone in it. This is where the story really begins. Catherine Elizabeth Middleton was never supposed to be royalty. She grew up in a regular English household, far from the palaces and pageantry of royal life. Born in Reading to Michael and Carol Middleton, her early life was defined by stability, not spotlight. Her parents ran a small but successful party supplies business and worked hard to give their children the best start they could afford. Kate, as she was known then, was the eldest of 3 and showed the kind of quiet discipline, even as a child, that would come to define her public image. She wasn't chasing fame or attention. She worked hard, stayed grounded, and found joy in ordinary things: school sports, friendships, and family. Her years at Marlborough College, a respected private school, shaped her character. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but she was consistent, focused, kind. By the time she enrolled at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland in 2001, she was already on her own path. She chose to study art history, a subject that reflected her appreciation for culture, meaning, and detail. She didn't arrive expecting to meet a prince, but that's exactly what happened. William was also studying art history, and at first their connection was nothing out of the ordinary. They were friends, classmates, part of the same circle. Catherine didn't treat him like a royal, and for William, that was probably the most refreshing thing of all. He had grown up surrounded by formality, eyes always on him. Kate gave him space to be himself. Over time, their friendship slowly turned into something more. There wasn't a single moment when everything changed, just a quiet shift. She supported him during tough times. When he struggled with his studies and considered leaving St. Andrews, it was Kate who encouraged him to stay. That kind of steady presence is rare. It didn't come with drama or grand gestures, just calm, thoughtful reassurance. They kept their relationship private for as long as they could. William knew what the press could do to a young romance. He had watched it happen to his parents. So they protected their connection, avoided unnecessary attention, and built something real away from cameras and headlines. When they did eventually face public attention, they already had a strong foundation. Even when they briefly split in 2007, it wasn't a tabloid spectacle. They took space, figured out what they wanted, and quietly found their way back to each other. The depth of their bond only grew stronger, and by the time William proposed in 2010 during a trip to Kenya, it felt less like a royal event and more like a natural next step in a story that had always belonged to just the two of them. Kate wasn't looking for a crown. She was just living her life, and somehow that made her all the more fit to wear one. When Catherine Middleton said yes to Prince William's proposal in 2010, the world celebrated. But behind the headlines and the sapphire ring, she was stepping into a life few could ever prepare for. Becoming part of the royal family isn't just about titles or ceremonies. It's about giving up the normal life you once knew. Their wedding in April 2011 was watched by millions. Westminster Abbey was filled with tradition, grandeur, and history. Catherine walked down the aisle in a gown designed by Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, a perfect blend of elegance and modernity. It wasn't just about the dress. It was the moment the public fully embraced her as the future queen consort. But while the ceremony marked her entry into royal life, the real work started after the cameras stopped rolling. From the beginning, William and Catherine tried to approach their life together differently. They didn't want their marriage to be swallowed by royal expectation. One of their first decisions was to keep her family close, something not always common in royal unions. Her parents, Carol and Michael, were still part of her daily world. William respected the life she came from, and they made sure the Middletons weren't pushed into the background. Catherine took her time finding her place. She didn't rush into public speeches or global tours. Instead, she quietly observed, listened, and learned. Her early public appearances were cautious, but never clumsy. She brought her natural kindness and calm presence into every engagement, and over time, she grew into the role, not by trying to be someone she wasn't, but by leaning into who she already was. The press, of course, followed her every move. There were comparisons to Princess Diana, questions about whether she could live up to the legacy, but Catherine never tried to imitate anyone. She walked her own path, steadily, carefully, and with a focus on the long term. Her work began to reflect that same approach. She chose causes close to her heart: children, families, mental health. And she didn't just lend her name, she showed up, asked questions, built relationships. She wasn't performing royalty. She was doing the work in a quiet, consistent way that built real respect over time. Married life inside the palace came with its own challenges. Catherine had to adjust to security protocols, strict schedules, and the constant presence of staff. Privacy became limited. Still, she and William found ways to keep a sense of normalcy, cooking at home, walking the dog, even doing school runs when they could. Their goal was always the same: protect their space protect their family. And through it all, Catherine stayed grounded. She didn't let the titles define her. She carried herself with the same steady presence that had drawn William to her all those years ago. She wasn't just fitting into the royal mold, she was gently reshaping it. Becoming a mother while living in the spotlight is no small task, but Catherine made it look natural, even when everything around her was tightly controlled. From the birth of Prince George in 2013 to Princess Charlotte in 2015 and Prince Louis in 2018, each milestone was met with public celebration. But for Catherine, those moments weren't just royal events, they were deeply personal. She wanted her children to have something she never had to navigate, a normal childhood in a very public world. Despite the palace, the protocols, and the attention, Catherine focused on giving her kids a strong emotional foundation. She was often seen doing school runs, attending parent meetings, and making time for bedtime stories. To outsiders, it might have seemed unusual. Why would a future queen consort be doing drop-offs at all? But for Catherine, these weren't chores, they were priorities. Balancing that kind of hands-on parenting with royal duties is a constant juggling act. Public engagements, speeches, travel, it never stops. And yet, she managed to show up for both. There were days when she would meet with mental health advocates in the morning, then head home to help with homework or cook dinner in the evening. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. Her approach to motherhood also shaped her public work. Catherine became heavily involved in early childhood development initiatives. She didn't just attach her name to them, she helped create programs, spoke with families, listened to health experts, and advocated for long-term solutions. For her, this wasn't just a cause, it was a calling. One moment that stood out was when she launched the 5 Big Questions on the Under 5 survey. It was a nationwide effort to better understand the first years of a child's life and how that affects their future. She wasn't asking for attention, she was asking for action, quietly and consistently. That balance between her private and public roles earned her trust. People began to see her not just as a figure in photographs, but as a mother with real concerns and real compassion. Even her parenting style reflected that. In public, she often knelt down to speak to her children at eye level, calming them during formal events or offering reassurance with a simple touch. Small moments, but ones that resonated deeply with parents everywhere. Still, it wasn't always smooth. The pressure to show up, smile, speak, and perform while raising 3 young children is enormous. Catherine rarely showed cracks in public, but those close to her knew how much weight she carried behind the scenes. It wasn't just about protecting her children, it was about holding herself together under constant scrutiny. And through all of it, she stayed steady. Not perfect, but real. A mother, a public servant, a woman finding her rhythm in a world that often demanded too much. For a while, it looked like the royal family had found its new rhythm. William and Catherine were solid in their roles, and when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped into the spotlight, the public saw what they hoped would be the future. 4 young, modern royals reshaping the monarchy together. At first, Catherine and Meghan seemed to get along. They appeared at events side by side, smiling, polite, professional. But behind the scenes, things weren't that simple. There were differences in background, in expectations, and in how each woman handled life under intense public pressure. Catherine, who had spent years slowly adjusting to royal life, had learned to be cautious and reserved. Meghan, coming from a media-driven world in America, was more direct and expressive. Those differences, though understandable, created distance. Then in 2020, everything changed. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, citing personal challenges and a desire to protect their mental health and family. The news stunned the world. For Catherine, it was personal. The small, supportive team she and William had built with Harry was gone almost overnight. The royal Fab Four dissolved. Catherine didn't speak publicly about it. She never does. But sources close to the family say it affected her deeply. Not just because of the roles everyone played, but because of what it meant for the larger picture. It wasn't just a family break, it was a shift in the royal structure, a fracture in the system. The tension between Meghan and Catherine became a favorite topic in the media, but much of what was reported was speculation. Catherine didn't fuel it, she didn't defend herself, or go on the record. She simply continued doing her work, attending engagements, supporting causes, and raising her children. That silence wasn't avoidance. It was her way of protecting the institution and keeping focus where she felt it should be. Still, the weight of that shift lingered. With Harry and Meghan gone, William and Catherine took on more events, more visibility, more pressure. They became the central figures in a streamlined royal family, one that was now operating with fewer hands and more expectations. Catherine, already balancing motherhood and public duty, quietly stepped up. She continued championing mental health and early development, even while navigating private disappointment. The strain wasn't obvious on the surface, but it was there, not just because of what had been lost, but because of what now rested on her shoulders. The rift between the couples changed more than headlines. It changed the dynamics within the family. It drew new lines around privacy, loyalty, and responsibility. And it left Catherine and William standing at the center of something much heavier than before. She didn't complain. She didn't explain. She just kept going. And that quiet endurance became her signature. Stronger, quieter, and more necessary than ever. In early 2024, everything went quiet. Catherine, once a consistent presence at royal engagements, school drop-offs, and charity events, suddenly disappeared from the public eye. No fanfare, no clear explanation, just absence. The palace released a statement, brief and vague, saying she had undergone abdominal surgery and would be recovering in private. For most people, that might have been enough. But Catherine wasn't most people. She was the Princess of Wales. And when she vanished, people noticed. Speculation filled the silence. Was it serious? Was she okay? Why hadn't she been seen for weeks? The public, used to seeing her smile on red carpets or chatting with school children, was left in the dark. And the longer it went on, the more the questions grew. What few knew was how deeply personal the moment had become. While Catherine was recovering at the London clinic, King Charles III was facing his own health battle. The weight of the monarchy, already shifting in recent years, now seemed more fragile than ever. William stepped up, taking on more responsibility, but he was also at Catherine's side, quietly prioritizing her over protocol. And then, just as the public began to ask louder questions, a single photo was released on Mother's Day. Catherine, sitting outdoors with her children, smiling. A carefully chosen image, meant to reassure, but to some, it only deepened the mystery. The Catherine in that photo looked thinner, tired, different. Then came March. In a video statement filmed at Windsor Castle, Catherine spoke directly to the public. The words were calm, but heavy. She revealed that, following her surgery, doctors had discovered cancer. She had begun preventive chemotherapy. It was a moment of quiet honesty, one of the most vulnerable admissions a senior royal had ever made. There was no emotion in her voice, but there didn't need to be. Her expression said everything. She wasn't delivering a public update. She was sharing something deeply human. It was a moment that broke through the royal facade. For once, titles didn't matter. This was a wife, a mother, a woman facing something terrifying and doing it in front of the world. Public support flooded in. People posted messages of encouragement, shared their own stories, and praised her courage. Catherine had spent years advocating for mental health, encouraging others to speak up, and now, by speaking out herself, she showed that she meant every word. She didn't try to be a symbol of strength, she just told the truth. And that made her stronger than ever. While the world speculated about Catherine's recovery, her absence, and her battle with cancer, something else, something completely unexpected, was quietly unfolding behind palace walls. Catherine was pregnant. It wasn't planned publicity. There was no baby bump watch, no cryptic hints dropped during public appearances. This time, there were no announcements at all. For once, there was no media countdown, no hospital barricades, no headlines racing to break the story first. Only silence. And that was intentional. After years of living her most personal milestones in front of the world, engagement, wedding, 3 publicized births, and now a cancer diagnosis, Catherine made a decision. This pregnancy would be private. Completely. Not because it was a scandal, but because it was sacred. Heron few people knew. William, of course, her medical team, a tiny circle of aides sworn to discretion. Not even all senior royals were told immediately. Staff who noticed her stepping back from engagements assumed it was related to her ongoing recovery. And given the timing, they were right to think so. But beneath the surface, something more profound was happening. Physically, it was difficult. Catherine's body was still healing from major surgery. Emotionally, she was navigating a cancer diagnosis while also preparing to bring a new life into the world. The duality was heavy, carrying both fear and hope at once. She wasn't just becoming a mother again, she was also, in many ways, fighting to stay one. William stayed close during those months, protective, present, and private. While his public schedule continued, it was scaled back. When he wasn't on duty, he was at her side. Their home at Adelaide Cottage became a tightly guarded space. No leaks, no hints, just time together, waiting. For Catherine, this wasn't about keeping secrets. It was about creating something sacred. After years of smiling for cameras, just hours after giving birth, after dressing up to walk down steps with makeup and heels while her body still ached, she decided she wouldn't do that again. This birth would be quiet, normal, if only for a moment. And when the time came, it was. The baby was born at St. Mary's Hospital, as were her first 3 children. But this time, there were no police barricades, no press pens, no crowd waiting to cheer. Just a small team of doctors in a private wing and William holding her hand. No gender was released, no name offered, no easel outside Buckingham Palace announcing the arrival. No tradition followed. It wasn't a royal event. It was a family moment. And in that moment, as Catherine held her newborn for the first time, something inside her broke, quietly, gently, but undeniably. According to someone close to the family, she turned to William, eyes full, and whispered 4 words, "I can't stand alone." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't performative, it was just real. Those words weren't about weakness, they were about weight. She had carried so much for so long: expectation, scrutiny, motherhood, illness, duty, always with a composed smile, always pushing forward. But in that delivery room, in the stillness that followed the birth, she let her guard drop. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't Princess Catherine. She wasn't the future queen. She was just Kate, a mother, a woman holding her 4th child, unsure of what lay ahead, and deeply aware that strength sometimes means admitting you need someone beside you. William said nothing, but he didn't need to. He held her, he held the child, and in that moment, the 3 of them were untouched by royalty, politics, or protocol. Just a family, newly reshaped, deeply bonded, and quietly changed. The 4 words, "I can't stand alone," were never intended to be public. They belonged to a quiet, vulnerable moment between 2 people who had built their lives on balancing privacy with duty. But privacy, in their world, doesn't last long. Within days, the quote had reached the ears of someone outside their inner circle. Whether it was shared out of concern, admiration, or a belief that people deserved to know, it eventually surfaced. And when it did, it lit a fire. No royal press release confirmed it. No palace spokesperson addressed it. But it didn't matter. The words spoke for themselves. They ran across headlines in bold font. Talk shows speculated. Royal watchers dissected tone and context. Commentators argued, was this Catherine's way of signaling that she was stepping back? Was it about her health, her family, or something deeper? An exhaustion that had quietly built for years. Social media, however, didn't question it. They understood it. Mothers, in particular, rallied around her. Women posted their own stories of whispering those same words at 2 a.m., holding crying newborns with aching bodies and full hearts. "I've said this," one woman posted. "Not out loud, but I've felt it. Every mother has." The response wasn't judgment, it was relief. Someone like Catherine, always poised and prepared, had finally let a raw moment slip through, and it made her feel more real than ever. But inside the palace, things weren't so simple. Traditionally, royal figures don't speak publicly about emotional overload. Struggles are managed quietly, behind heavy curtains, in tightly controlled environments. Personal breakdowns are not part of the brand. And yet, here was Catherine, Not on camera, not in an interview, but in her most unguarded moment, admitting she felt overwhelmed. That confession struck nerves. For some in the royal household, it was a wake-up call. Catherine had always been considered the steady one. She didn't break protocol. She didn't stir drama. If she was reaching her edge, what did that say about the rest of the system? Others were less moved. There were whispers about too much openness and setting a risky precedent. A few even feared the monarchy might lose its image of strength if its most admired member was now seen as emotionally fragile. But William pushed back, firmly. He had watched Catherine carry burdens no one saw. He knew the price she paid for every flawless appearance, every forced smile, every calm response under a storm of attention. Her moment of truth wasn't a breakdown, it was a release. And it mattered. Behind closed doors, conversations began to shift. The senior royal team started quietly reassessing expectations. Could schedules be adjusted? Could senior royals be allowed more personal time, more boundaries, more honest breathing room? Catherine herself didn't return with a carefully worded statement or a soft denial. She simply carried on, just as she always had. But now, there was a slight change in her presence. A bit more ease, a bit more space around her. She no longer had to perform perfection. She had already admitted what many had long suspected. Being royal doesn't make you immune to breaking points. And somehow, that truth made her stronger. In the aftermath of Catherine's quiet confession, the royal family faced a silent reckoning. The woman who had stood gracefully through relentless scrutiny, relentless responsibility, and relentless expectation had finally said, "I can't do it alone." Not in public, not in protest, just in truth. But the ripple effect was real. Inside royal circles, there was tension, an uneasy pause. Senior aides who had long relied on Catherine's resilience began to question whether they'd taken it for granted. Had they assumed too much? Expected too much? Had the institution grown so used to her strength that they stopped asking how she was coping? That moment in the delivery room peeled back layers, not just from Catherine's life, but from the system around her. This wasn't just about a secret baby. It was about how much one woman could carry while the world demanded her composure. And yet, as the days passed, Catherine showed everyone exactly who she was. She didn't retreat, she didn't crumble, she simply shifted. Her public appearances returned gradually, calculated but warmer. She smiled, greeted well-wishers, met with charities, and carried out engagements. But there was a noticeable difference. She moved with a gentler energy. Her gaze lingered longer during conversations. She no longer seemed pressed to prove she was fine. Instead, she simply was. This wasn't a new Catherine. It was the same one, only more whole. She had shed the burden of appearing untouchable. William remained at her side, not just as a future king, but as a present partner. Their bond, long admired, now seemed more essential than ever. When Catherine leaned on him during those postpartum days, not metaphorically, but literally, he was there. And that quiet image began to define them more than any palace portrait. Together, they had chosen a different path. They weren't rejecting the monarchy, they weren't dismantling duty, but they were reshaping how those things could be done. The birth of their fourth child wasn't just a private joy, it was a turning point, a subtle declaration that their family would come first, even inside the most public institution in the world, that their roles wouldn't override their reality. And perhaps most notably, they made a new rule. No more sacrificing mental and emotional well-being for tradition. That rule didn't need a press release. It didn't need Parliament's approval. It began the moment Catherine looked at her husband and said she couldn't stand alone. And he responded, not with words, but by choosing to stand with her. For the monarchy, that's the kind of change that doesn't come often. But for the people watching, it's the kind of change that finally makes sense.